Back in 2013, one of the biggest and most promising sites on the entire web was Tumblr. The platform was gaining hundreds of millions of views a month, with the sky being the limit of where they could go next. Because of this, they were able to sell the entire company for a whopping $1.1 billion to Yahoo, who had plans on making it the next key player in the online arena. A little over half a decade later, however, and things aren't looking as good, with monthly users down over 90%. With it bleeding money, it was sold yet again last year, but this time for only $3 million, a fraction of a percentage of what they paid for it back in 2013. This leads to the question of what happened to this once industry leader in social media. Well, to understand that, we'll first have to go back over a decade. This story begins in 2007 when the site was launched by founder David Karp, and in a matter of days the platform had tens of thousands of users. It was an instant hit. From there, its user base grew by millions. Tumblr was one of the many companies that took off in the gold rush of social networking sites. Each company back then had their own gimmick to add to the formula of online communities. MySpace was social networking for music. Facebook was social networking for college students. Twitter was social networking for text messages. And Tumblr's claim to fame was it was centered around blogging. While not a word used much nowadays, back in the 2000s, everyone was hyped up about blogs being the future. While never as popular as the media and the business world made them out to be, 15 years ago it was pretty common for people to have their own online diaries, where they could share their thoughts for the world to see on their own personal websites. Tumblr took the concept of blogging and added a community aspect to it, where everyone's writings were on the same website with the ability to reblog one another's creations. Since the concept of blogs started to die off the years following its inception, Tumblr became a place where you could grow more specific and niche communities about whatever interests you had, with a very big user base of artists who would share their work to millions of fans. Along with this, you had many groups of deviants that considered themselves outcasts to society. This created groups that became very loyal to the platform. All of this caused a steady increase in new users of the website, with several rounds of investments. By 2013, it was one of the most viewed websites in the entire world, catching the eye of Yahoo, which was at the time looking to diversify as their older businesses were not as big as they once were, and they saw Tumblr as a great investment. Upon the purchase, however, things started to go downhill. Firstly, many of the site's users were enraged by the conglomerate buying the platform, with petitions being started along with people threatening to move to other websites. To make matters worse, Yahoo was seen as out of touch compared to its younger competitors Google and Facebook. I feel these factors hurt Tumblr immediately, because if we look at Google Trends, you can see an immediate decline in the fast-growing website after the acquisition. But even if views were down a bit, as long as the site could get advertisers rolling in, that would really be the most important thing to make the purchase worthwhile. Unfortunately, Yahoo soon found out that big companies were not as interested in putting their ad dollars on the site as they hoped when they paid $1 billion for it. You need to understand that unlike Facebook, where you could have very targeted ads since the site has so much personal information on its users, or Google, where you could have the ad show up when people search specific keywords that they're looking for, Tumblr as a platform doesn't really lend itself to advertisers. Much of the user base is pretty anonymous and come to the platform for a very specific interest, making it difficult for advertisers to pinpoint the perfect match for ad spending. On top of this, at the time, a large percentage of the content on the site was pornographic in nature, which let's just say isn't the type of material Coca-Cola or Ford wants to be endorsing. In these regards, I would compare Tumblr to Reddit in terms of difficulty getting advertisers. Just like Tumblr, the front page of the internet is notorious for having a bad return on investment for brands, and reports show that the site still bleeds money to this very day because of it. The only reason why this fact hasn't been a problem for Reddit is that they've continued to grow and gain investors, as Tumblr tanked. It wouldn't be crazy to say that the failure of the Tumblr purchase was a contributing factor for Yahoo getting acquired by Verizon in 2017, with the money sink now being their problem to deal with. At first, Verizon didn't really fiddle much with Tumblr, even if it was losing them money. But at the end of 2018, after a round of bad press that the site had a rampant problem with pornographic content featuring minors, they decided to ban almost all nudity, even though it accounted for a high percentage of the site's popularity. People like to say that they removed the adult content to try to get more advertisers, but in all honesty, I think it was more of the fact that the cost of putting a system and team in place to remove the illegal content would cost more money than they wanted to spend on a dying subdivision. So they just cut their losses on that front front and removed it all, even if it meant it would speed up the downfall. As the site continued to lose users, in August of 2019 it was announced that Verizon was going to be selling Tumblr to Automatic, the owner of WordPress, for what was rumored to be less than $3 million. A far cry from the $1.1 billion Yahoo paid only a few years prior. Since the site was still getting hundreds of millions of views each and every month, I've seen many people wonder why they were only able to get a few million for such a popular platform. And the answer comes down to a few main things. For one, in business, a company often can still be valuable even if it's losing money or losing popularity, but not both of those two things at the same time. Let me explain. A company like Amazon or YouTube lost money for years, but they were still valued in the billions because investors saw that they were growing and were willing to lose money for the time being in hopes that they'd make tons later on when the business takes over the world. Meanwhile, a company like, let's say, GameStop has a very bleak future as more and more people buy video games digitally, driving down brick and mortar sales. But for the time being, the stores remaining can still make investors millions before the chain goes the way of the dinosaur. So there's still value there, albeit for the short term. Now let's look at Tumblr. With a slowly dwindling user base, there's not much hope for a future to the website. And since it's also losing money currently, there's no chance of milking extra revenue out of it for the remainder of its lifespan. Since you're getting the worst of both worlds, no company really wants it. My guess is that Automatic doesn't have any major plans to revive the site, rather they want to use it for parts. Maybe they'll take some of the talent working at Tumblr to work at other divisions, take a decade's worth of user data and stats to mine for information that will be put in an algorithm to be used elsewhere, and take the site's infrastructure to put to use in other forms. In conclusion, it wouldn't surprise me if Tumblr goes the way of Vine and disappears even if it still has a sizable audience. With the cost involved in operating a site of that size, the chances of it ever making money are pretty unlikely, showing that just because a company is popular doesn't necessarily mean it's profitable.
Je peux